Actually, next month, it'll be 14 years. And we've been an alliance partner with Infor. Actually, that should say what's new in 2017. I apologize. Still stuck in last year. We've done 18 of these 10x upgrades, and we've got 14 Lawson customers that we now do managed support for. So we don't do any hosting for them. We're essentially managing Lawson for them in all kinds of capacities. So from just troubleshooting to user support to applying maintenance fixes and patches to their application and maintaining security, maintaining interfaces, even customizations, that sort of thing. So now on to what you came here for, which is the 10x upgrade. Now, I had a lot of questions about whether we were going to discuss the cloud upgrade here or an on-prem upgrade. This presentation is focused on an on-prem upgrade, okay? But the cloud upgrade is a great option also, especially if you've waited as long as you have and you're looking to be live on version 10. I think that's actually a great idea, and we can talk to you about that as well. But this specific presentation is actually focused on doing an on-premise upgrade. A lot of what we talk about here actually applies to a cloud upgrade as well, because a lot of it is just methodology and how to manage the project so that it does get done in that amount of time. So I don't want to say that it's not relevant to the cloud, but our focus when we were building the webinar was on a prem upgrade, so an on-prem upgrade. So why do this upgrade? Well, the first thing is the extended support for 901 deadline is coming up on May 31st. You obviously get to be on the latest technology and application changes. You get to take advantage of the new IPA product, which is the M4 process automation. It replaces what you may be familiar with as process flow or process automation, and quite a mature product now, and lots of great functionality. There's also a lot of new BI tools from Infor, a lot of different BI suites that you can start taking advantage of. There's a cleaner look and feel, the kind of the Soho look and feel, I believe it's called, and a lot of more browser supportability. But some of these browser supports are actually now available in the very latest versions of 901 as well. So you may not be able to see the slide all that well. I try to put it all in one thing, but you may have a hard time. Now, actually, this is a good time to point out, if you hover over where the slide is, near the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a square box with 4 arrows pointing out, and that'll help you maximize the size of the screen. And I recommend doing that. Because it'll put it basically almost at full screen, and you may be able to see some of these slides a little better because there's some text on the screen. I'll go over it. None of the text is going to be that important to read. The point of this slide is to show you, this is a document that I made sure I got the latest version of yesterday. This is the Infor Lawson Product Lifecycle Maintenance Policy document. You can download this from Infor Extreme yourself. And as of yesterday, anyway, there hasn't been any update to the end of extended maintenance for the 901 product. I can't tell you whether or not there is going to be, but as of yesterday, there isn't. So May 31st is still the final deadline for extended maintenance. And there is I think that's basically, let's see, it says that little superscript that you see, the number 10 superscript, I made sure I kind of got the superscripts down here too. And it says mainstream will be 4 years and extended 1 year for 901 only. So that's that essentially is all the information that's currently available for the 901 application. And that applies to Windows or Unix, and I believe it applies to AS400 as well. That leaves you 124 days or so to be on version 10, which, as you know, I'm sure a lot of you have been through major software upgrades. That's not a lot of time, but we've done enough of these that I believe that it's very possible that if you were to start your project in the next couple of weeks or so, you could still hit that date. Now, you may say, well, what if I don't hit that date? What's the worst case scenario? What's the best case scenario? So the best case scenario is you don't hit any issues until the end of the year, meaning you can kind of go through life without having to contact N4 support. And that's somewhat likely for a lot of you. Maybe, the software runs well, you don't have a lot of issues, so you don't have to contact N4 support that often. But at the end of the year, there will be no payroll updates, and there'll be no accounts payable updates, and obviously no support for your environment. But really, that kind of buys you until really the end of the year from a perspective of risk. Now, the worst case scenario, and this is just working with customers and hearing from a lot of different people. I'm not saying any of these things are going to happen. But one possible scenario is that, BSI, which is the great software that produces all the, that provides all the tax calculations and information for you, that they could release a cyclical update that requires a version 10 environment as a minimum release. Now, if that happens, that means you can't upgrade to that cyclical. So you'll be left on the previous cyclical with the previous calculations, and you won't be able to update your tax information. Now, that to me is actually the most clear and present danger of this, right? It's just the biggest risk I think you're taking by not being on the latest version now and losing support on May 31st, that you may not be able to run payroll correctly after that date. Now, again, that is not to say that's going to happen necessarily before the end of the year. It's just a risk that you should be aware of. The other thing is you could have a possible update to the operating system of your server that conflicts with the environment. But if Lawson is not, or M4 is not releasing any new environment updates for the 901 application or environment, then you will no longer be able to update to keep up with your operating system, and that may cause conflicts. And the other risks still apply. Obviously, the year end is going to be a big deal. Now, let's say you have no payroll and you don't have accounts payable. Well, I guess in that case, technically, there isn't a big risk other than, you don't have a supported application. So if the thing goes down, you don't have a place you can call to get a resolution to it. Most of you folks are working for a large corporation with lots and lots of employees, and Lawson's handling a substantial portion of your business. So I think you understand the risk of not having that support. Now, before I begin, I want to point out one KB article that can give you more information that I could ever hope to give you, ever. So this is Knowledge Base Article 1444526. This is the Infor Lawson 10X Information Center. It's a great document. It has links to just about anything you could possibly want to learn about the upgrade, including changes and release notes and links to webinars and guides for all kinds of things, including install guides and upgrade documentation, even the recommended training that goes along with it. It's a phenomenal document, and I'll be honest with you, without this document, I wouldn't know half the stuff I even know, because that's usually where I go to find the links that I need to. And the document is relatively well updated, I believe. Okay, and so I have the latest version, a screenshot of the latest version. It's a multi-page PDF document with really great links in it. And all the links work, but I believe you have to be logged into N4 Extreme while you're clicking the links, because the links are within N4 Extreme. And it was last updated on September 2nd of 2016, so that's not very long ago. It's a very well-kept document, and I highly encourage you to, no matter what your role is within the organization, there's something in here that'll be useful to you, and highly encourage you to go get it and look over it and find out what sections of it are relevant to you. So again, I'll go back. You can either search topic number 29307, or you can look for article 1444526. So by the way, I said that we would post documents and things like that on our webinar. If a document is available from InfoExtreme, you won't find it on our website. You'll go to InfoExtreme to find it. So just note that number and go ahead and download it from InfoExtreme. So how do we get there before May 31st? It does sound like a crazy, daunting task, and I'm not saying that it's possible for every organization, but there is a path to getting there, okay? It is going to require certain discipline, and it's going to require some shortcuts. It's going to require some compromises, and it's going to require you to get started very quickly if you haven't already. Now, a lot of you have already started. This document I can make available to you. If go ahead and reach out to me. This is not something we make available on our website, but if you reach out to me directly at tan@nogalis.com, I'm more than happy to share this with you. This is a timeline document that we put together for an upgrade. Now, this is our normal 22-week upgrade schedule, okay? So we go based on the 22-week, but if you notice, we don't even get involved until week 5. So 5 minus 22, that's 17. That's how many I told you is left. And this is technically accounting for 3 rounds of testing, which takes up another 3 weeks, okay? So technically we could do it in 14 if we were to push. That's why I think you can do this by May 31st, okay? It would require a lot of very quick movement, you know, getting servers up and things like that very quickly, and doing some very quick testing from your users, and getting a lot of buyout from your business. And we'll go over all of these parts, okay? And again, I'm more than happy to share this document with you. What it has in it, it basically has by category. So each column is a category of tasks. So by business, your business team, your network team, your system admin and developer team, the installer that you're working with, your users and your developers, they each have a certain group of tasks. And this kind of tells you how long those tasks typically take, when in the process they begin, and which bucket they fall into. And then the last section, the execute section that you see at the very bottom, that whole blue and red section is just 1 week. So the rows above it are each a week, but that whole section is just 1 week of the go live. So it's starting from the Monday prior to the go live, going through until Friday, which let's say the go live begins or the cutover begins, and then all the way to the Monday where you're live on version 10. So what do you do before you begin your upgrade? Okay, so this is a very important step. And in your case, if you haven't started, now I know a lot of you have actually already started on your 10X upgrade. I saw a lot of the names on the list that have signed up for this webinar, and I am actually aware of a lot of your projects, so I know a lot of you have started, and I applaud you for joining this webinar, because the fact that you've started doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get done by May 31st, and hopefully you'll take away some things today that'll help you speed things up. So this is, if you haven't begun yet, the thing to do is to make sure that you complete a good pre-install checklist. Now, we use a pre-install checklist when we work with our customers. If you reach out to me, I'm more than happy to share that with you as well. So this goes over which applications, all your server information, your architecture, and usernames and passwords your installer may need. We basically outline every single thing that an installer and an analyst and the developers are going to need once you start this project, so that those things don't hold things up, because a lot of them either require a hall pass from security, or they require, some sort of business buy-in, or they may require to order you to order licenses and things like that. So there's that server prerequisite where you'll have to order your Visual COBOL licensing in case you're you have obviously not upgraded to version 10. So Visual COBOL is a new component that of licenses that you'll need to order. Your version 10 application licenses, again, those are available to you from N4. You do have to request them. It does take a few days, so you want to make sure you're on top of these items. And then, your product downloads and making sure you got your Infor Extreme accounts for everybody who's going to be involved, and download permissions, that sort of thing. All of that is in our document. And I encourage you to create a document for yourself, fill it up with nothing unanswered, because if you're going to make that date, you can't have hiccups that are going to derail your project by even a few days. So definitely complete this document. So the other thing that we recommend is a dedicated project manager. Now, when things need to move fast, somebody's got to be there to make them move along. So a dedicated project manager who can coordinate schedules and coordinate meetings, clearly defines good roles for everybody, for the project team, and has all the contact information, vacation schedules, that sort of thing for the team. Limits project meetings as much as possible, because there's a lot of doing here, not as much talking, hopefully, and then not a whole lot more decision making. We decided to go live with version 10. We are all on board that we're going to do it by May 31st, or hopefully before then. So there's not a whole lot to meet about, other than the things that we need to do to keep things moving along. And then also using an issue tracking tool for everything within your project. So we have a policy of trying to reduce email as much as possible. And the best way to do that is with one of the many tools that are available today. We use Jira. We've created a Jira project architecture for Lawson 10X upgrades specifically, that helps us with a very specific type of workflow that has helped us cut project times by as much as 25%. So we love using Jira because it really helps kind of shore up issues and move things along, give people ownership to things. And I highly recommend using it. You can get a Jira account through Atlassian. Or if you're working with, if you were working with us on your upgrade, obviously you'd be using, our Jira platform for that. It's an indispensable tool. I recommend you at least look into it. And if you don't want to use Jira, you have another tool in-house, use it, okay? But use something. Email is not an effective way to communicate, is what really I'm getting at there. Especially if you're trying to resolve issues quickly. And I'll get into that a little bit more. Availability. So making sure that everybody kind of has buy-in on the timeline of this project and they're all available. Your technical staff, there's after-hours availability, because there is going to be installers that are going to be working on getting everything installed for you, and a lot of them are going to have to end up working after hours. And the problem is if they get stuck after hours and there's no one else to help them get unstuck, like a good help desk or some sort of priority ticketing system, then you've basically essentially wasted 24 hours, and that's not where you want to be if you're trying to get this done quickly. And the availability of your functional users. Obviously, your functional users, they have a day job already. This isn't doing upgrades is typically an IT function. So this isn't part of their normal job, because they're running a good portion of the business already. So you have to get good buy-in from them, set really good expectations with them, but then making sure that they are available to resolve issues and they are available to test. That's the main thing they're going to be doing. And to field functional questions, especially if you have a lot of modifications that they're going to need to kind of be involved in figuring out how that's impacted by going to version 10. I'll talk really quickly about tools that we use that I feel help us speed things along. So again, I mentioned Jira. the biggest thing that I think Jira does for us is I'll name a few things. One thing that it does for us is it helps us eliminate the email problem. And the email problem is I may email, Scott on my team, and Scott might forward that email to Desi on my team, and so on. And I may lose track of that email, and I don't really know who owns it anymore, if it's an issue, and if we're all getting copied on it, my inbox is going to fill up with a lot of things I have no interest in at some point because I'm no longer owning it. So it can cause you to read and go through a lot of information you shouldn't have to, or worst case scenario, lose track of an issue completely. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is that there's no ownership with email. Just because I sent you something by email doesn't mean that I've technically assigned it to you. So that assignment is very important in a project like this because you want to make sure people own tasks. And that ownership is a big part of why we've been successful in all the upgrades that we've done. Having a really good remote access VPN, we prefer the Cisco AnyConnect VPN. It makes it very seamless and quick, but making sure that you're working with a decent way to access your application servers remotely, especially if your installer is working remotely. Now, if everything is being done within the four walls of your building, this is not something you necessarily need to worry about, but it really helps. One tool that I didn't mention here is WebEx. Has been a great tool for us to use, or something similar to it. I mentioned jump boxes here. Now, the reason jump boxes are important in a process like this is, you've got basically one server that people are working on, like your application server, for example. And many people may need to work on that machine, but you don't have a whole lot of different, sessions available or whatnot. Now, somebody could just be on what we call a jump box. So that's basically a VM or a PC that's set up somewhere for people to work on, and it allows the session on the server to stay open so that not everybody is on there. That's helped us to kind of work parallel with each other so that we're not waiting on somebody to get off the box until we can get on it. So that's kind of a big deal. You don't need a whole lot of those, but at least one or two. We use a tool called Slack for in-house communication. Slack is a messaging tool, very much like an IM tool or Skype, but it allows for a little deeper level communication, especially around technical tasks, because you can kind of share code pieces and things like that very easily and files easily. Highly recommend that. And on the server, we typically like to be able to install, and we can remove later, an LDAP browser, Notepad++, the Chrome browser, and something called Classic Shell. And this is on Windows we're talking about here. So some of you who are Unix customers, this won't really apply to you. And those things kind of help us with productivity a little bit, and we can always install it afterwards. Some organizations have rules against installing outside tools on servers. Totally understand, but it can help. Lastly, we use our own LSFIQ security reporting tool quite a bit during upgrades. That helps us validate, migrate security, migrate users, and make sure that NTIDs stay intact and things like that. There is a free version of that we just released recently, so you're more than welcome to sign up just for the free version, and you can use it for your upgrade. And you can find out more about that on our site by just searching for LSFIQ. So the installation. So this is kind of the big piece here. I would say your goal is to be live on Lawson, so you're supported by May 31st. So if that is the goal that you share, then maybe just use 2 environments for now. So if you have, 5 or 6 environments typically that you're working with, really only 2 of those need to be live by May 31st, right? The rest you can work on after that deadline. So by 2, I mean, your test environment and your production environment. Now, I understand organizations work differently. This is just a recommendation. It doesn't work for everybody. but that's something you may consider. Installs take a very long time to do, okay, because you're installing a lot of different components. We're talking a week, maybe more. So, if you can save that amount of time, then go for it. The other thing you might want to consider, if IPA or process flow is not critical to running your business, okay, if it isn't critical and you don't have any landmark applications, you could possibly install landmark after May 31st. Now, I'm not saying don't install it. I'm saying you could wait until you're live with version 10, and then you can install that. And then you can federate it later if possible. So even if you have to install it, you don't necessarily have to federate it for your go live. You can wait. And if, these are things that we're trying to shave a few hours, few days, few weeks off your time so that you can make it. None of these things are recommendations I would make if you have like a year to do your upgrade. But, you guys only have 3.5 months. So customization. So going through your customizations and just picking the essential stuff out for now. What are the things that I need to run the business? Which interfaces are really necessary for us to bring over? And then prioritize those. Try to do all of them, but at least your priority one stuff will get across by May 31st. Additional applications, like obviously, if you're running payroll, you're going to need BSI. And by the way, BSI has a great cloud solution now that some of you may not know about, and I highly recommend looking into it because it can reduce your install time locally as well. So, if you're going with that solution, you won't have to necessarily install and upkeep it anymore. I don't have a whole lot more information for you other than, maybe contact BSI. Things like LBI, MSCM, LBP, Lawson Smart Office, EDI, all of these things. Consider these before you, in your pre-install checklist to make sure that these additional applications are accounted for and whether or not you're going to need them at go live. I mean, you're really going to have to pick and choose, your top players here and the things that are really necessary for running your business. And if some of these are not, you've got some customers where LBI is basically everything for them, okay? So without LBI, they wouldn't be able to run their business. But then we also have some other customers that have just a few reports that, they could probably live without for a few months on LBI. And for those customers, I'd say, you know what, let's move LBI to post-go live. So again, it's a decision you need to make. The other is installing Mingle. Definitely have to install it in order to be supported. Possibly you can install it, in a way that you're going live by May 31st still with your S3 application and you're installing Mingle afterwards. That's something you really have to talk to your installer about and may not be an option for you. And you want to make sure that you're still supported. So that's just an idea. I'm not saying necessarily one way or the other. And then as far as installing application patches and whatnot, definitely I'd say apply the ones you're going to need that you find during your testing. Leave the big one, leave any other ones for maybe post upgrade because you're going to install the latest MSP hopefully, and that should be good enough. So going and searching for patches to install, prior to that time, it's just going to take more time. It's going to require to go back and retest, and it's going to add weeks to your timeline. So just do the ones that become necessary as a part of your testing. And then, the question really to ask is, what can we live without for just a few weeks, right? You're trying to make your deadline, and even if it seems like you can squeeze it in, if it's not necessary, maybe do it afterwards. So things like, Smart Office again, LBI, some specific interfaces or some of your customizations. If you don't need a customization until year end or quarter end, for example, maybe that's the one that can just sit there and wait. I mean, I'm sure you're working with great developers. They can always get it in time later. So testing, this is where upgrades end up taking a very long time sometimes. So you want to make sure that testing is well coordinated, well defined, and that you're supporting your users well, okay? Because they have another job. So you can't just say, hey, I need this tested by Friday. You got to give it back to me, and then you don't get to test anymore. You have to work with them. You got to get their buy-in. But at the end of the day, everybody needs to be on board to make this deadline because it is a serious deadline. And keep in mind, your May 31st of 2016, which is almost a year ago, that was the actual deadline, right? And so since then, you've been paying an additional 20% in support probably to enforce. So there's cost savings by just doing this upgrade that you want to capture as well. So it isn't just, the fact that you don't support it. So everybody should be on board, including users. I would limit, at this point in the game, I would limit it to 2 testing passes. I wouldn't do any less than 2. I think 2 is kind of the minimum anyway, but typically we like to see 3, but I'd say limit to 2. But in order to do 2 successfully, I would say pick your data refresh date wisely, meaning the date you pick to move the data over for your first pass of running the upgrade program, make sure that's a date in your system that makes sense to you, that's maybe a date that payroll folks can test with, that AP folks can test with, maybe a date that you can even test some month-end stuff. So that's kind of key. You want to make sure that date is picked wisely so that you've got a pretty good testing scenario. The other thing we recommend, obviously, if you've got test scripts from your previous upgrades, use those. You may have to update them a little bit, but make sure you have test scripts. So what do I mean by a test script? For those of you who are not familiar with it, a test script is a document. It's not a server type of script, but it's a document that you use to step through a test scenario. And anyone should be able to pick that document up and go through that test. You shouldn't have to be an expert. So that's how detailed it has to be. So a potential test script is, enter a new hire into the system, or create a new vendor, or create an invoice for a vendor, or submit a requisition. So those are test scripts, and you want to make sure that you've outlined them step by step so people can go through them. Any part in that fails, it's a failed test script. You're going to have to go back and figure out what went wrong, fix it, come back and retest, and then retest again in your next pass. Process testing and obviously interface testing, you want to make sure that's prioritized within the organization, again, with most important first. And there's nothing in all of this that says you can't go live with some problems. You can go live with a few problems, and it's fine because, as an organization, you can probably work around those. So keep that in mind too. Not every ticket needs to be resolved, okay? We typically strive for that. And when we have time, we normally don't go live until every ticket is resolved. But there are some issues that become post-go live. Now, the closer and closer you're getting to that date, if your goal is to meet that date, then maybe some of these things can wait. Now, who should your testers be? So your application testers, our recommendation is you start with a very small group of people, with a dedicated group of functional users. Don't go and enlist the entire organization in testing. That's just going to take a very long time. It's going to be very, very difficult to manage and assign ownership. So you want to make sure that they have good availability for the upgrade. That means getting buyout from your senior leadership, that these folks' time is going to be spent on this. And if you don't get that buyout, you're going to have problems later when they they're starting to hit other deadlines with other projects, and they get pulled off of your testing, and then you're going to slip. So as a good project manager, you want to be a good steward of everybody's time, and that making sure that your leadership is on your side with going forward. Now, if they are not, that means you're not going to hit that 531 date, and that's what they should be aware of. It's just about setting that right expectation. And then, unfortunately for everybody in the call, the ability to work after hours and on weekends is pretty key to an upgrade process. I think you guys have all been through that, and you already kind of know what goes along with having to do all the testing and all the upgrade work. Making sure you test everything well. The things that typically get left out is employee self-service doesn't get tested all that well. And I'm not saying because the functionality needs to get tested well, but a lot of your organizations have a lot of fields and sections of ESS, MSS hidden so that the employees can't see them. Now, through an upgrade, those might get unhidden. So you want to make sure you're testing and make sure the message you're sending to your employees is the same message you had prior to the upgrade. I won't say any more about that, but I think you all know what I'm talking about. The requisition center, you want to make sure that's tested well, because it's typically, for organizations that use requisition center, it's a very key part of their business. Mobile supply chain and the handhelds, you want to make sure that's tested really well, because in a lot of your hospitals that we've worked with, that's a pretty key component of running the hospital. And when MSCM is not functioning well, no one's happy. So you want to make sure you're on top of that and you're testing it. And I'm just focusing on the things that typically go miss. And then EDI, this is the one that for some reason nobody tests until last minute, and we end up finding out a little bit too late in the game. But from experience, we've learned that we don't let that happen again, and I want you to take that experience with you. Make sure you're testing all your EDI maps and your EDI processes, and you're testing them correctly. Training. So if there's any good news in all this, this is the slide. You technically don't need a lot of training in version 10 from an application standpoint anyway. And even from an environment standpoint, on the LSF site, there's not a whole lot new. There are some new things, and there are some things that are no longer there. But from an application standpoint, a short 2-hour webinar for each group has sufficed for every upgrade we've done. Everybody's been very happy with that. We record those webinars for our customers, and we give it back to them so they can use it in-house for future review. And then we typically have a 1 or 2 hour Q&A session if they want to dig a little deeper into some of the improvements in the application. A lot of the new stuff is really around new auditing capabilities, so there's not a whole lot new there. And the application really hasn't changed a whole lot, so there's not a lot new to train with. But there are certain things you definitely need to know, but we found in a 1 to 2 hour webinar, we've been able to cover those for each of the suites. So this is going to be a little bit of a repeat probably, but organizationally, you want to make sure you've got the buy-in from the organization on the necessity of the project and the importance of the deadline. If you don't, you're going to have problems. I would say budget appropriately, so you don't have to go back and ask for additional funds, because that can sometimes take 1 or 2 weeks, and 1 or 2 weeks is something you don't have. So maybe budget appropriately plus whatever percent you normally would have your projects run over, because internally you probably have a really good idea of that, and then go get that budget approved. Here's a really good one that some of you may not be able to do, or you think that you can't do it right now. Getting a pass on your tight security up front, okay? So like getting your Lawson credentials for your installer, getting network security rules and firewall settings removed from your new servers, getting SA rights to your database. These are things that are going to become necessary through the install. So you can either work out those battles with organizations ahead of time, or you can waste several days during the upgrade process getting a result, and you're going to end up having to give them up anyway, because that's just what the upgrade takes. So if you don't do these things ahead of time, and you don't get that expectation about getting a kind of a hall pass on some of the tight security, then you're going to waste time, and that's really the impact of that. So setting expectations with users, executive, contractors early on how much time they're going to have to be available, what hours you need from people, how much funding you're going to need for your project, all of those things become very key in reducing wasted time going back to ask for additional resources. We have a great article on our site on how to cut consulting costs by up to 30%. I highly recommend you look that up, and there's a lot of pointers in there. And a lot of that is about increasing efficiency on projects. So that may help you out as well. So just search our site for how to cut consulting costs. On Nogalis.com, there's a search box near the top. You should be able to find that easily. And then last but not least, your go live and cutover. So try to be flexible on dates and times. So a lot of times we start bringing up dates, and what we hear back is like, oh no, that's a payroll week. Oh no, that this is really, at the end of the day, guys, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what week it is. There's never a good week to do an upgrade. It's never good. It's never going to be one of those things that the business is like, oh, we don't use Lawson this week. No, you're using it every day. You're using it every week. I understand that payroll weeks can be very scary, but at the end of the day, this is going to take one weekend. There's a go, no-go decision at some point in that weekend, and if it's a no-go, you switch back to your 901 system, nothing's lost. So really, it's just a matter of which weekend is everybody going to be available and willing to work very, very hard for one weekend. So that's the weekend I would go with, and I would pick the earliest possible weekend you can go with, because if you have to, you can never move things up after that. Usually you can only push them back. So we like to begin on a Thursday evening on a cutover if the server is available. So meaning, the users essentially take Friday off for us to be able to do the work that we do. But if that's not available, Friday, noon also works. And if that's not available, Friday afternoon works. But the later you get on Friday, the less of a chance you're going to be able to, smoothly sail through Sunday. So Thursday evening, end of business, would be a really good time to start if you can do it. Availability, during the go live weekend of functional and technical staff, it's more or less an all hands on deck type of weekend. I think a lot of you have probably already been through it. You know what I'm talking about. And then having a plan around issue resolution. So you just need to have a plan. And then everybody needs to understand that plan and follow that plan. We use Jira for that as well. So I highly recommend you also do. But that's about all the items I have on the Go Live cutover. And I think that is my last slide. So what we're going to do, I have Desi with me as well. So I'm going to also make her a presenter. And we're going to attempt to answer all your questions. And by attempt, I mean if there's something I don't know the answer to and Desi doesn't know the answer to, we're going to work together to get that done. So the way you ask questions is use that box on the lower left hand of your screen to answer the question, or ask the question, I'm sorry. So you can just type it in there and hit enter, and I'll be able to see your question, and I will answer it here live. And we'll continue to record through that session, the QA session. So let's see. The question Clay asks, who do we email to get these documents? Good question. I'm sorry I didn't mention that earlier. My name is Tan, T-A-N, like the color. You can just email myself, tan@nogalis.com. You can also go to our website on the contact page, and you can just use the contact form there if you like to contact us. Just make sure you kind of mention in the topic upgrade webinar, and it will find its way to our team here. You can also email Desi @nogalis.com, and we're both more than happy to share that with you. So Sean asks, are there additional costs for V10 license apps and COBOL? Sean, I hate to have to not answer that, but what I can tell you is I don't know much about licensing and costs from Infor and Visual COBOL. What I can tell you is my experience. My experience has been that customers have had to pay to purchase Visual COBOL, but I believe that replaces their existing COBOL license. So it's not a net new cost. It is a different cost. You do have to pay it, I believe, and there's obviously support associated with that. And then with your V10 application licenses, again, I'm not going to answer for Infor, but I believe what my customers have gone through before is if you're currently under support and you're up to date with your support, I don't believe there's a cost associated with obtaining version 10 licenses since you are supported. Regina asks, is the session recorded? Can I listen again? I joined late. Yes, Regina, it is recorded. It will be available on our website at nogalis.com/education. And I'm hoping to get it up there by Monday. You are more than welcome to, log in there and get to it. We'll follow up with an email also when that's available, so you guys can follow the link directly. So Clay says, you're the second person who said, don't go live with Mingle since all Mingle does is call Lawson Portal. I didn't actually say that. So I believe Mingle is a required component in order to be supported with Lawson version 10, okay? Portal is still available to you. What I did say is since a lot of the supportability of the application pivots on being on version 10 of the application, and if you don't have time by May 31st to install Mingle, that's something you could potentially do right after May 31st. I think you should have it, and I think you should put it in place. Now, you do need to discuss that with your installer because depending on how you're doing your install, it may be difficult to get that Mingle install done afterwards. So you kind of want to make sure you have that in there. But whether or not you choose to use it, that's something, client to client, it varies. And then John asked, I thought Mingle was a requirement with version 10. It is a requirement for support. You don't have to use it. So a lot of customers use Portal still, but Mingle is, so there are two different presentation layers. They're both still available as of the latest version. Now that could change as of the next version. So keep up with the publications, keep up with the availability and compatibility matrix. Work with your installers at the time of your install. Know what you're getting into with the presentation layer before you proceed. But I did not say you don't have to install it. You do have to get it installed, I believe, to be supported. But it isn't a necessary component to run your applications. How's that? And then it says of your 10 clients, how many did not go live with it? Keep in mind, we will have to install Mingle. So far, all the customers that we've gone live with, and keep in mind, they've had plenty of time to go live. So the ones that we have already gone live with all have had Mingle installed and configured. Of those, I can't tell you how many of them are actually using it. I think the majority of them are still using the Portal product. I think I need to look at Desi's presenter role here. Let's see. Desi, can you, okay, there we go.
I think I'm good now.
So
can you hear me? Okay, great. Awesome.
Okay, sorry, I had you muted, it looks like. Okay, very good. I apologize. Did you have something to add about Mingle or anything like that?
No,
Desi?
I think that you covered it pretty well.
Okay, anything else?
No, I think you covered Mingle.
On the questions we've been asked? Okay, good.
No, I think we're good.
Right. Okay. The other question is Mingle, so Janet asked, is Mingle needed for LSO, for Lawson Smart Office? Unless something has changed in the very recent versions of either of those two, I don't believe that's the case. No, I don't. It is not a requirement for Lawson Smart Office. Again, unless something has changed in the very recent versions, that is not my experience. And I can say that with some certainty because Mingle actually resides on so for those of you who don't know, and I believe some of this technology is about to change, so don't come back in a few weeks and tell me I was wrong. There's some technology changes coming to Mingle. I believe I heard this back in, first I heard it in Forum 2016 that the SharePoint piece of Mingle will eventually go away. So I'm not sure how the integration with Smart Office will work then, but as of right now, it's really just residing on its own server and channels a lot of what Portal does through SharePoint. Okay, let's see. one of the things I actually wanted to add is, so Clay kind of posted a comment there. One of the things that happened with one of the recent releases of the portal in version 10, the logout button is back in portal. So if you were concerned with using portal and not having a logout button, that is there now. That's still there from the latest version we just installed for a customer. So if that's a big concern for you, that's there. That you should be fine. So Terry asked, have you seen reports of the Mingle interface being quite slow? I've seen both scenarios. I think it just depends on making sure that you've got a good configuration. And sometimes, depending on the customer, that they're pretty strict about how they want SharePoint handled and installed. We go for a very minimal footprint of SharePoint usually. Which isn't even like, I think it's just SharePoint Foundation, which is like a free version of SharePoint. And then I can't say that we've had any customers that have decided to go fully with Mingle overall this time as their interface for all their users. I think actually one has. I haven't heard any, reports that it's slower than any other way of accessing the application. So John asked, would you recommend using Enterprise SharePoint or just the basic framework installed? Yeah, again, I wish I had my installer on the line to give you kind of his rant about this, but we really unless I don't know much about, okay, so I should qualify this. So with Mingle, I don't know much about the Mingle, there's a kind of pro version of Mingle, what is it called? Mingle Enterprise, I believe. I don't know much about that tool. I personally haven't worked in it. I know some of my folks have. That may require a different installation to SharePoint, but the Mingle presentation layer only that you normally would install to work with the application doesn't require a full SharePoint professional install. So we don't recommend going the SharePoint Enterprise route with that because SharePoint can get pretty complicated. And if SharePoint from version 12, I believe, is on its way out, then, maybe you don't want to invest a lot of time configuring SharePoint, that much.
Tan, this is Debbie.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Just to add to what you're saying, you're correct that the more advanced Mingle that has the social collaboration and all that stuff, that does require the enterprise SharePoint framework.
Good. Okay. Yeah, excellent. So, John, hopefully that answers your question. If you're using the enterprise Mingle, then maybe you want to look into that. I would look into the install docs for each one of those things to get your definitive answer. And honestly, look into the exact version because from version to version, these things can change. No surprise either, right? It's a different version of the application. Obviously, it's going to have different requirements. So you want to make sure of that. Melody is asking, if you install Mingle in ADFS, is ADFS required or can you still use LDAP? We have done both. There are both are supported. You can still use LDAP. Yeah, you should be fine. Any other questions, guys? So hopefully this answered a lot of your questions about the upgrade. It wasn't really intended to. It was more intended to help you kind of figure out how to cut the clutter out and really get to the meat of the upgrade quickly and get your project done faster. I personally fully believe that you can go live by May 31st if you start your project in the next 30 days. Okay, so that's pretty aggressive, but I know you can do it, but you're going to have to really follow just about everything I said here. We've done an upgrade in 14 weeks before, from beginning to end. Really quick customer, really great set of users, and also kind of played along with all the rules. But we actually had a lot of challenges in that project too. There was some server security stuff that held us up for like a week and a half or 2 weeks. But yeah, I mean, 14 weeks is a pretty quick upgrade, and that was 2 servers with all the bells and whistles. So you might want to consider that. And then we've done another upgrade where, this was a recent one where the customer decided since they didn't use IPA for anything, they did not need a landmark install. So that cut down their upgrade time by quite a bit. So I fully believe it's possible. And I highly recommend being live by May 31st. I would find it a very responsible thing to do for the organization that you're in, because being off alone support is not recommended. And again, I want you to really consider the cloud application as well as a part of this, because really, as the cloud product becomes more mature, that's a definite possibility, and it may be that it's a more expedient way to go, because the cloud team might be able to stand up your environment quickly, and you may be able to get through your process in time. There is another question from Clay. It says, what about upgrade programs? Do you find the upgrade utilities to be good to validate the upgrade data copies? The upgrade programs, Clay, are just the same old upgrade programs. They haven't changed a whole lot. So they work well. It helps that we have experience running these things for the past, 14 years or so. Some of my guys have been working with Lawson for 25 plus years, so they literally know that every bit of thing that could go wrong. Things do go wrong from time to time, but they don't do necessarily validation. We have, they do some level of validation, but we have a tool that we've created in-house called UG Verify. It's a upgrade verification tool that we created that goes through and kind of verifies that the data got copied over perfectly. So you do have to kind of do your own level of verification, but, helps to have some tools in hand. But overall, really nothing replaces testing. John is asking how many data migration runs do we typically run through? Desi, what do you think? 3?
Yeah, we normally do 3.
Yeah, we've done 4, but I think 3 is kind of 4 is sometimes pushing it. I think if you're having issues after 3, maybe go for 4, but definitely you want to do no less than 2.
Right.
And then Clay's asking, we have tables that have more records than version 9. Okay, actually, this is a funny question that came up now, Desi, right? I mean, we're right now where the question that came back. We sent them the output. Yeah, we sent them the output of our UG Verify tool, and it tells you a lot of information. So one of the things was, why do some tables have more data in my version 10? Some tables have less data. That's probably fine and explainable, okay? So you don't need to examine every single table. So there's a lot of dictionary tables within your table set. So there's something like a few thousand tables. And so, that may be over counting them, but there's a lot of tables. Some of them are going to have a little bit more data because there's some additional dictionary definitions. Some of them are going to have a little less. So there's that. One thing that we did learn is you're going to have, the ACA tables. There's no upgrade program for the ACA tables. So you're just going to have to, if you've applied all the ACA patches in version 9 and you've got data in there, you're going to have to apply all the same ACA patches in version 10 and copy that data over. And Desi, you just did that for a customer. Do you want to kind of tell us a little bit more about that process?
Yes, so what we did for this customer was we updated we added the ACA patches to their version 10 environment up to the patch level that they had in version 9. And then we just dumped the data out of the source database from our data set that we were using, and then imported it into the version 10. And then from there, the records matched exactly.
Good. Okay, that looks like it was the last question. I'm going to start recording now, and thank you all for joining the webinar. If you have any questions at all, go ahead and email me or Desi at tan@nogalis.com. That's T-A-N, like the color, at nogalis.com, and Desi is just D-E-S-I at nogalis.com. Or you can use the contact us form if you want any of the pre-installed checklists and stuff like that we normally use. Those are the few items that we don't post on our site. We consider those proprietary, but if you want them, please let me know, and I'm more than happy to share them with you. Again, if you have any other questions or comments, or if you want to see other webinars regarding either upgrades or any other topic, feel free to use our contact us form or email me directly. Either way works. Thanks again. Have a great day, and we'll have this webinar posted for you soon.